My name is Alanna, I'm 28 years old, and 2 hours ago a sheriff knocked on my door with an eviction notice for the house I bought with my own money. My hands were trembling as I stood in that courthouse hallway, watching my parents Dorothy and Frank smirk behind their lawyer. The signatures on the documents were perfect forgeries of mine. 6 months ago, I thought buying this house would finally prove I'd made it in life. I never imagined my own parents would steal it from me. Before we dive into this shocking story of betrayal and greed, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you dealing with difficult family members too? Please hit that like button if you believe family should support your success, not sabotage it. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell because this story is about to take some unbelievable turns that will leave you questioning everything about family loyalty. Let me take you back to where this all started. I grew up as the daughter of Dorothy and Frank, two people who never missed an opportunity to remind me how much the world owed them. My mother worked at a grocery store for 30 years, bitter about every shift, while my father jumped from job to job, always blaming his bosses for his failures. They lived in the same cramped apartment for decades, convinced that success was a luxury reserved for people who cheated their way to the top. I was different. From the moment I could work, I did. 3 jobs through college while studying marketing, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen noodles until I could recite the sodium content from memory. My parents called me foolish for pursuing education. College is for rich kids who want to feel special, my mother would say while lighting another cigarette in our smoky kitchen. You'll end up in debt and still working minimum wage like the rest of us. But I graduated summa cum laude, landed a position at a promising tech startup, and spent 5 years climbing from entry-level coordinator to marketing manager. Every single paycheck, I put aside money for my dream, owning my own home. No roommates, no landlords, no parents telling me I was wasting my money on rent. Just my own space where I could finally breathe. The house hunting process took months. I looked at dozens of properties, ran numbers until my eyes blurred, and finally found it. A 3-bedroom colonial in Brookside, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors who actually waved when they walked their dogs. The moment I stepped through that front door, I knew I was home. When I called my parents to share the news, the silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Dorothy's voice came through, dripping with venom. Must be nice to throw money away on some fancy house while your family struggles. Frank's contribution was equally supportive. You probably can't even afford the taxes. Don't come crying to us when you're foreclosed on in 6 months. My younger sister Megan, still living at home at 25, texted me later that night. Mom and Dad are really upset, she wrote. They think you're showing off. Maybe you should have talked to them first. I stared at that message for a long time, wondering when my success had become an insult to my family's failures. Closing day arrived on a beautiful Thursday morning in March. I sat in that title company office, signing document after document, my hand cramping, but my heart soaring. When they handed me the keys, I actually cried. The loan officer smiled and said, "Congratulations, homeowner." Those 2 words meant everything. I had done it. Despite every prediction of failure, every snide comment about knowing my place, every reminder that people like us don't own property, I had done it. I posted photos on social media that afternoon, me holding the keys, standing in front of my red front door, spinning around in my empty living room with sunlight streaming through the windows. Friends from college commented with heart emojis and congratulations. Former colleagues shared their excitement. And then I noticed something strange. My parents, who usually commented on everything I posted with passive-aggressive observations, were completely silent. The housewarming party was planned for 2 weeks later. I sent them a proper invitation, even offered to pick them up since Dorothy always complained about driving in unfamiliar neighborhoods. Their response came through Megan. They're busy that day. When I asked what they were busy with, she mumbled something about a doctor's appointment that couldn't be rescheduled. We both knew it was a lie. What I didn't know then was that my parents were already planning. While I was picking out paint colors and scheduling furniture deliveries, they were sitting in their dim living room, resentment festering like an infected wound. Dorothy had pulled up the property records online, studying the purchase price with growing fury. Frank had driven past the house 3 times, each visit making him angrier that his daughter lived in a neighborhood he couldn't afford. The first sign of trouble came when Dorothy showed up unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I found her on my porch, examining the doorframe like a building inspector. "This wood is probably rotting," she announced instead of saying hello. "You got taken advantage of, Alanna. This place is falling apart." She pushed past me into the house, her critical eye scanning every surface. "These floors will need replacing within a year. That kitchen backsplash is outdated. Is that a water stain on the ceiling? I hope you kept money for repairs, though knowing you spent everything on the down payment trying to impress people." Frank arrived an hour later, claiming he was in the neighborhood, which was strange since Brookside was 40 minutes from their apartment. He walked through my home like he owned it, opening closets, testing faucets, even checking the electrical panel in the basement. "You should have had me look at this place before you bought it," he said, shaking his head. "Could have saved you from making such an expensive mistake." That night, they sat in my living room, the house I'd worked so hard for, and demanded to see my paperwork. "We need to make sure you didn't get scammed," Dorothy insisted, her hand already reaching for the folder on my coffee table. "Let us review everything. We're your parents. We're looking out for you." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way Frank kept glancing at the folder, or how Dorothy's fingers twitched with impatience. I pulled the documents away, saying I had everything handled. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "So you're too good for our help now?" my father spat. "Think you know better than people who've been around longer." They left shortly after, but not before Dorothy delivered her parting shot. "Pride comes before a fall, Alanna. Remember that when this house becomes a burden you can't carry." As I locked the door behind them, I noticed something odd. There were fresh scratches around the lock, as if someone had been trying different keys. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the move was making me imagine things. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. My parents weren't just angry about my success. They were planning something. And as I would soon learn, there was no limit to how far they would go to take what I had earned. The rumors started exactly 1 week after my parents' surprise visit. I was grabbing coffee before a morning meeting when my phone rang. Aunt Ruth, my mother's sister who rarely called, sounded hesitant on the other end. "Alanna, honey, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm only calling because I'm concerned." My stomach tightened. "Your mother told me about your situation with your boss. She says that's how you really got the house." I nearly dropped my coffee. "What situation? What are you talking about?" Ruth's uncomfortable silence stretched before she continued. "Dorothy says you've been having an inappropriate relationship with your boss. That he pulled strings to get you the loan. She's worried about you, says you're in over your head and too proud to admit it." The accusation was so absurd I actually laughed, but it was a bitter sound. My boss, Keith, was happily married with 3 kids and had been nothing but professional in our 5 years working together. I explained this to Ruth, who seemed relieved but confused. "I thought it sounded off," she admitted. "But your mother was so convincing, had all these details about secret meetings and special favors." I confronted my parents that evening, driving to their apartment with fury burning in my chest. Dorothy answered the door with false innocence plastered across her face. "Oh, Alanna. What a surprise. Come in, dear. Your father's watching TV." They acted like nothing had happened, offering me stale cookies and warm soda as if I dropped by for a casual visit. "Why are you telling people I slept my way into homeownership?" I demanded, cutting through their charade. Dorothy's eyes widened in mock shock. "I never said any such thing." "You must have misunderstood. Ruth always did have trouble hearing. I simply mentioned you seemed very close with your supervisor. If people drew their own conclusions, that's not my fault." Frank barely looked up from the television. "Don't be so dramatic, Alanna. Your mother's just concerned about you. That house is a big responsibility. If you needed help affording it, you should have just asked us instead of." He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. The gaslighting was so blatant it took my breath away. They sat there in their dingy living room with walls yellowed from years of cigarette smoke and tried to convince me I was imagining their sabotage. I left without touching their hospitality, but not before Dorothy called after me. "We only want what's best for you, sweetheart." Sometimes the truth hurts. The second week brought a new tactic. Frank appeared at my door on a Saturday morning with a man he introduced as his contractor friend, Eddie. Eddie was a thin, nervous-looking man who kept glancing at Frank as if seeking approval. "I thought Eddie should take a look at your foundation," Frank announced, already heading toward my basement. "Just to make sure everything's solid." I followed them, uncomfortable but unsure how to refuse without seeming paranoid. Eddie spent 20 minutes poking at perfectly sound concrete walls, making worried noises while Frank nodded gravely. Finally, Eddie delivered his verdict. "You've got serious problems here. Foundation's compromised. Could be looking at 60, 70,000 in repairs. Maybe more." My heart stopped, but something felt wrong. Eddie wouldn't meet my eyes, and when I asked specific questions about the supposed damage, he mumbled vague responses about structural integrity and potential catastrophic failure. I thanked them for their concern and said I'd get a second opinion. Frank's face darkened. "You don't trust my guy?" "Eddie's been in construction for 20 years. He knows what he's talking about." 3 days later, Eddie called me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your dad paid me $500 to lie about your foundation," he confessed. "I needed the money, but I can't do this. Your house is fine. Better than fine. It's solid as they come. I'm sorry." He hung up before I could respond, and when I tried calling back, his number was disconnected. My sister Megan started showing up more frequently after that, always with some excuse. She needed to borrow a cup of sugar. She wanted to see how I'd decorated. She was thinking about moving out and wanted advice. At first, I welcomed her visits, grateful for family support that seemed genuine. But then I noticed her real interest wasn't in our conversations. "Can I see your home office?" she asked one afternoon, her voice artificially bright. "I'm thinking about setting up something similar when I get my own place." I showed her the small room I'd converted into a workspace, and she immediately gravitated toward my filing cabinet. "You're so organized. What kind of system do you use for important documents?" The questions became more specific. Where did I keep my mortgage paperwork? How did I organize my tax documents? Did I have a safe, or did I just use regular files? When I found her in my office during a bathroom break, phone in hand, photographing my mortgage statement, my heart shattered. "Megan, what are you doing?" She spun around, phone clattering to the floor. Her face crumbled, tears immediately streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. They made me do it. They said if I didn't help, they'd kick me out. I don't have anywhere else to go, Alanna. I'm trapped." I sank into my office chair, the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. My baby sister, who I'd protected from bullies in middle school, who I'd tutored through high school algebra, was spying for our parents. "What do they want with my documents?" I asked, though part of me already suspected. Megan wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "They want to teach you a lesson. That's what they keep saying. That you need to learn your place, that this house has made you forget where you come from. Mom found some lawyer who says there might be ways to fix the situation." The financial attacks started the following Monday. I was in the middle of presenting to a major client when my phone exploded with calls from an unknown number. I silenced it, but the calls kept coming. My assistant knocked on the conference room door, face pale. "Alanna, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your father's on the line. He says it's a family emergency. Your mother's been in an accident." I excused myself, hands trembling as I took the call. Frank's voice was calm, too calm. "Your mother's fine," he said immediately. "But you needed to learn that your fancy job isn't more important than family. We needed to talk to you, and you weren't answering." The client presentation was ruined. Despite my profuse apologies and attempts to recover, the damage was done. We lost the account, and Keith had to have a serious conversation with me about professional boundaries. I couldn't explain that my parents had essentially swatted my career without sounding insane. 2 days later, my credit monitoring app sent an alert. Someone had tried to open 3 credit cards in my name. The applications included my social security number, birth date, and mother's maiden name, all information my parents had. When I called to dispute the applications, the representative mentioned the applicant had claimed to be calling on my behalf, saying I was too busy with my important job to handle it myself. I spent hours on the phone freezing my credit, filing fraud reports, and trying to undo the damage. Each agency required extensive documentation, proof of identity, and explanations for why my own parents might be committing identity theft. How do you explain that to a stranger? Yes, the people who raised me are trying to destroy my life because I bought a house. It sounded like the plot of a bad movie. That weekend, I installed a security system. Cameras covered every entrance, motion sensors protected the windows, and I changed all the locks to high-security versions that couldn't be easily picked or duplicated. The locksmith raised an eyebrow at my extensive requests. Had some break-ins in the neighborhood, he asked. I couldn't bring myself to admit I was fortifying against my own family. The first notification came at 2 a.m. Motion detected at the back door. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone, heart racing, and saw Frank's face illuminated by the porch light. He was kneeling by the lock, something metal glinting in his hand. I watched in horror as my own father tried to break into my home. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. The officers took my statement, examined the footage, but seemed skeptical. "You sure you want to file a report against your father?" one asked. "Family disputes can get messy." I let it drop, but saved the footage to multiple locations. Evidence was mounting, even if I didn't yet understand what I'd need it for. The next family gathering was Grandmother Rose's 90th birthday. I almost didn't attend, but I couldn't hurt my grandmother because of my parents' behavior. The party was at Uncle Bill's house, neutral territory where I hoped my parents would behave. I should have known better. Dorothy made her entrance with dramatic flair, immediately drawing attention to my arrival. "Oh look, everyone! The homeowner graces us with her presence. I hope we're not too common for you now, Alanna." The room fell silent, relatives shifting uncomfortably as she continued. "Some of us remember where we came from. Some of us don't abandon family just because we get a little success." Frank joined in, his voice carrying across the room. "Maybe if she hadn't spent all that money on a house she can't afford, she could help out her family once in a while. But no, Alanna's too good for us now. Won't even let her parents see the deed to make sure she didn't get swindled." I tried to leave quietly, but Grandmother Rose caught my hand. Her eyes, still sharp despite her age, bore into mine. "What are they planning, sweetheart?" she whispered. I've seen that look in Dorothy's eyes before. She's scheming something. I kissed her papery cheek, unable to voice my fears. "Just be careful," she warned. "Your parents, they've always been envious people. Envy makes people dangerous." As I drove home that night, I finally admitted the truth to myself. This wasn't just about a house. This was about control, about punishment for daring to succeed where they had failed. My parents didn't just want to see me struggle. They wanted to take everything I'd built. And as I would soon discover, they had already set their plan in motion. The name Gary Hutchinson first entered my life through a casual mention by Megan. She'd called on a Thursday evening, her voice strained with barely contained anxiety. "Mom and Dad have been meeting with some lawyer," she whispered, as if they might hear her through the phone. "His name is Gary Hutchinson. Alanna, I think you need to know what they're planning." I was folding laundry in my bedroom, the mundane task a welcome distraction from the chaos my life had become. At the mention of a lawyer, my hands stilled on a pillowcase. "What kind of lawyer? What are they planning, Megan?" My sister's breathing was shaky. I overheard them talking about power of attorney documents. Dad kept saying something about teaching you a lesson about family loyalty. "They've been practicing your signature, Alanna. I saw Mom with printouts of your name, tracing it over and over like she was in elementary school." The pillowcase slipped from my numb fingers. "They're going to forge my signature? For what?" But even as I asked, pieces of a horrifying puzzle began forming in my mind. The requests to see my documents, the break-in attempt, the questions about where I kept important papers. They weren't just gathering information. They were preparing to steal my identity, my home, my future. Megan's voice dropped even lower. There's more. Mom's friend Linda, the one who works at the county clerk's office? She's been coming over for coffee a lot lately. Last week, I heard Mom promise her $5,000 for some kind of favor. Alanna, I'm scared. Gary Hutchinson turned out to be exactly the kind of lawyer you'd expect my parents to find. A quick Google search revealed a man who operated from a strip mall office between a payday loan shop and a liquor store. His website, clearly designed in the early 2000s and never updated, advertised aggressive legal solutions and creative approaches to complex family matters. The reviews were sparse but telling, with several mentions of ethics violations and one ominous warning about elder abuse cases. I hired a private investigator that weekend, a recommendation from a colleague who'd used their services during a messy divorce. Patricia Chin was a former FBI agent who now specialized in financial fraud cases. When I explained my situation, she didn't blink at the family connection. Family members commit more identity theft than strangers, she said matter-of-factly. They have access and opportunity. Let's see what your parents are up to. While Patricia began her investigation, I tried to maintain normalcy. Work required my focus, and I couldn't afford to lose my job on top of everything else. But concentration was nearly impossible when every phone call might bring news of another betrayal, every unknown car in my neighborhood might be another spy sent by my parents. The security cameras became my obsession. I checked them constantly, watching for any sign of intrusion. My vigilance paid off on a Wednesday afternoon when I was supposed to be at work. I'd called in sick, exhausted from stress-induced insomnia, and was lying in bed when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. The camera showed Frank at my front door, but he wasn't alone. A heavy-set man in an ill-fitting suit stood beside him, holding a manila folder. They knocked, waited, then Frank produced a key. My blood ran cold. Despite changing the locks, he had a key. How? I crept downstairs, staying away from windows, and listened as they entered my home. Their voices carried clearly in the quiet house. She keeps everything in the home office, Frank was saying. Filing cabinet by the window. Here, I took pictures of how everything was arranged so we can put it back exactly right. The other man, who I assumed was Gary Hutchinson, chuckled unpleasantly. Doesn't matter if she notices after we file the quitclaim deed. By then, it'll be too late. Your daughter will learn that family comes first, one way or another. They spent 20 minutes in my office. I heard drawers opening, papers rustling, the distinctive sound of a scanner. They were copying everything, creating a paper trail for whatever fraudulent scheme they'd concocted. When they finally left, I emerged from my hiding spot and called Patricia immediately. Don't touch anything, she instructed. I'm on my way with a forensics guy. We need to document everything they touched, and we need to figure out how they got that key. The forensics expert found fingerprints everywhere, but more disturbing was what the hidden camera I'd installed in my office revealed. Gary Hutchinson had used a portable scanner to copy my mortgage documents, bank statements, and most critically, multiple examples of my signature from various papers. Frank had stood watch, occasionally offering helpful observations about my habits and schedule. Patricia's investigation uncovered the locksmith connection within days. The same man who'd installed my high-security locks had made an extra set of keys, paid $1,000 cash by my father. Family emergency, Frank had told him. My daughter has health issues, and we need access in case something happens. The locksmith, now facing potential criminal charges, was cooperating fully with authorities. But the real shock came when Patricia uncovered the depth of Linda Morrison's involvement. Dorothy's friend at the county clerk's office wasn't just accepting bribes. She was an active participant in the fraud, using her position to research property transfer procedures and identify the fastest way to process documents without triggering standard reviews. Your parents are planning to file a quitclaim deed, Patricia explained during one of our meetings. It's a simple document that transfers property ownership from one party to another. Normally, it requires your notarized signature and would be flagged for review. But with Linda's help, they plan to push it through the system quickly, hoping you won't notice until it's too late. My cousin Jake worked at a title company across town, and Patricia suggested I reach out to him. Jake had always been the responsible one in our generation, the first to graduate college and start a legitimate career. When I explained what was happening, his professional demeanor cracked. "Are you serious? Aunt Dorothy and Uncle Frank are trying to steal your house? That's insane." He promised to monitor any suspicious filings involving my property, using his industry connections to set up alerts. "The system isn't perfect," he warned. "If Linda knows what she's doing, she might be able to push something through before the standard checks catch it. You need to be ready to act fast." The preparation on my parents' end was meticulous in its malevolence. Megan, racked with guilt but too terrified to fully break away, continued to feed me intelligence. She reported that Dorothy had created a full dossier on me: daily routines, work schedule, gym habits, even which grocery store I preferred. They knew when I'd be home and when I'd be away, planning their moves with military precision. The signature practice sessions were particularly chilling. Megan sent me photos of Dorothy's work, sheets of paper covered with my name and increasingly accurate recreations of my handwriting. "She sits at the kitchen table for hours," Megan texted. "Dad times her to see how fast she can sign without it looking rushed. It's like watching someone prepare for a performance." On a rainy Tuesday that would forever be burned into my memory, Jake called with panic in his voice. "Alanna, they've done it. Someone just filed a quitclaim deed for your property. The document showed up in our system 20 minutes ago. It's already been recorded at the county clerk's office." My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the phone. "How's that possible? Don't they verify signatures? Don't they require identification?" Jake's silence was deafening before he responded. "The signature looks perfect, Alanna. If I didn't know this was fraud, I'd swear you signed it yourself. And it was processed by Linda Morrison personally, marked as expedited due to family emergency circumstances." I raced to the courthouse, Patricia meeting me in the parking lot. We stormed into the clerk's office, demanding to see the documents. Linda Morrison was conveniently absent, suddenly taken ill according to her coworkers. But the deed was there in black and white. My property, my hard-earned home, had been transferred to Dorothy and Frank for the sum of $1 and other valuable considerations. The notary seal belonged to someone named Marcus Webb, whose address matched Gary Hutchinson's office. When questioned later, Webb would claim I had appeared in person to sign the documents, providing a detailed description that sounded nothing like me but perfectly matched Dorothy when she wore a wig and sunglasses. Standing in that courthouse, staring at the forged documents that threatened to destroy everything I'd worked for, I felt a cold rage replace my panic. My parents had crossed a line from which there was no return. They weren't just trying to teach me a lesson or put me in my place. They were attempting to steal my life, to erase my success and claim it as their own. "We need to file an emergency injunction," Patricia said, already on her phone with colleagues. "And we need to contact the police. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Your parents are about to learn that blood doesn't protect them from consequences." As we left the courthouse, I saw Gary Hutchinson's car in the parking lot. He was sitting inside, speaking animatedly on his phone. When he saw me, his face paled. He knew I knew. The game was up, but the battle was just beginning. My parents had successfully stolen my house on paper. Now I had to fight to steal it back in court, and I was prepared to burn every family bridge to do it. That night, I changed the locks again, installed additional cameras, and hired a security guard to patrol the property. If my parents thought a piece of paper gave them the right to my home, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I'd worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let them win. The war for my house had officially begun. The sheriff arrived at 9:23 on a Thursday morning, his marked cruiser pulling into my driveway just as I was preparing to leave for an emergency meeting with my attorney. I watched through my living room window as he checked his paperwork against my house number, his expression professionally neutral. My security guard, Marcus, intercepted him at the walkway, buying me precious seconds to call Patricia. "Don't say anything without me," she instructed, her voice tight with urgency. "I'm 10 minutes away." This is intimidation tactics, nothing more. They can't actually evict you yet. But when I opened the door to the sheriff's knock, the papers he handed me suggested otherwise. "Ma'am, I'm serving you with a notice to vacate," he said, not unkindly. "The property owners have filed for immediate eviction based on unlawful occupancy. You have 30 days to contest this action in court." Behind him, I saw a sight that made my blood boil. My parents' beat-up sedan pulling in behind the sheriff's cruiser. Dorothy emerged first, dressed in her Sunday best as if attending a celebration. Frank followed, his face split by a grin I'd never seen before, equal parts triumph and malice. Behind them came Gary Hutchinson, briefcase in hand, and most shocking of all, a small moving truck driven by my Uncle Terry, my father's brother who I'd barely spoken to in years. "Thank you, officer," Dorothy said sweetly, approaching with the confidence of someone who believed they'd already won. "We appreciate your prompt response. As you can see, our daughter has been squatting in our property despite repeated requests to leave. We're prepared to take possession immediately." The sheriff looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. "Ma'am," he addressed me, "the paperwork appears to be in order. The deed clearly shows transfer of ownership. If you have documentation to dispute this, you'll need to present it in court." Patricia's car screeched into the driveway before I could respond. She emerged like an avenging angel in a power suit, her heels clicking aggressively on the concrete. "Officer, I'm Ms. Chen's attorney. I assume you're aware that serving eviction notices for properties under legal dispute requires specific procedures that haven't been followed here." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. The owners showed me the recorded deed and a court order signed by Judge Michaels. Everything appeared legitimate. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Judge Michaels is on vacation in Florida. I'd be very interested to see this court order." What followed was a tense examination of documents on my front lawn. Patricia identified 3 procedural violations in minutes, while Gary Hutchinson sweated through his cheap suit. The sheriff, realizing he'd been potentially drawn into a fraud scheme, began asking harder questions. Dorothy's sweet demeanor cracked like old paint. "This is our house," she shrieked, jabbing a finger at me. "We have the deed. She's the one committing fraud, pretending to own something that belongs to family. Arrest her." Frank stepped forward, his face red with rage. "You've disrespected us for the last time, Alanna. Pack your things and get out, or we'll have you dragged out." The confrontation drew neighbors from their homes. Mrs. Patterson from next door, who'd brought me cookies when I first moved in, looked shocked at the scene. Timothy from across the street had his phone out, recording everything. The public nature of their attempted theft was backfiring spectacularly. Patricia addressed the sheriff with calm authority. "This deed was fraudulently obtained through forgery and identity theft. We've already filed criminal charges. I suggest you verify that court order with Judge Michaels' office before proceeding, unless you want to be named in the lawsuit for wrongful eviction." The sheriff made a phone call that lasted 10 uncomfortable minutes. When he returned, his expression had shifted from professional neutrality to barely contained anger. "The court order is fake," he announced. "Judge Michaels' office has no record of it. Mr. Hutchinson, Ms. Morrison, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I'm going to need you all to come to the station for questioning." Gary Hutchinson tried to flee, actually running for his car in his ill-fitting suit. He made it 3 steps before tripping over Mrs. Patterson's garden hose and face-planting into her petunias. Uncle Terry, seeing which way the wind was blowing, quickly drove away in the moving truck, abandoning my parents to their fate. "This is a misunderstanding," Dorothy wailed as the sheriff called for backup. "We're her parents. We have rights." She manipulated us into signing over the house and then changed her mind. "We're the victims here." The lies flowed like water, each more desperate than the last. Frank's approach was different. He stood silent, staring at me with such hatred I involuntarily stepped back. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "Family is supposed to stick together. You've chosen strangers over blood. There will be consequences." As additional police units arrived, the situation escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. Gary Hutchinson was arrested on the spot for presenting fraudulent court documents. My parents, while not immediately arrested, were instructed not to leave town and to appear for questioning the following morning. The neighbors dispersed slowly, the scandal providing gossip material for months to come. That evening, my phone rang constantly. Family members who'd remained neutral suddenly chose sides. Grandmother Rose called first, her voice stronger than I'd heard in years. "I've cut Dorothy out of my will," she announced without preamble. "Any child of mine who would steal from their own daughter is no child at all. I'm leaving everything to you and Megan." Uncle Bill, my mother's brother, revealed information that shocked me further. "Your parents borrowed $50,000 against their house," he said. "They showed me the deed, asked me to co-sign. Thank God I refused. They were planning to sell your house and disappear with the money. Dorothy bragged about teaching you a lesson while setting themselves up for retirement. The betrayal ran deeper than mere greed. This was planned destruction, designed to leave me homeless and penniless while they profited from my years of hard work. The cruelty of it stole my breath. These were the people who'd raised me, who'd been there for every birthday, every school play, every milestone. How had their resentment grown so poisonous? Megan arrived at my house that night with 2 suitcases and mascara-streaked cheeks. "I can't live with them anymore," she sobbed. "When they got back from the police station, they accused me of warning you." Dad threw my laptop against the wall. Mom called me a traitor and said I was dead to her. "They've lost their minds, Alanna." I held my sister while she cried, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. At 25, Megan had never lived independently, our parents' control keeping her dependent and afraid. Now she was free but terrified, cut off from the only home she'd known. "You can stay here as long as you need," I promised. "We'll figure this out together." The legal battle began in earnest the next morning. Patricia had assembled a team of experts, forensic document examiners, financial investigators, and computer specialists to trace the digital footprint of the fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Dorothy's signature practice sheets, found during a search of my parents' apartment, showed hundreds of attempts to recreate my handwriting. Frank's computer contained Google searches for how to forge documents, property transfer without owner knowledge, and, most damningly, countries without extradition treaties. The private investigator uncovered Gary Hutchinson's history of similar schemes. He'd been disbarred twice in other states, reinventing himself each time. His partnership with Linda Morrison went back years, a lucrative arrangement where she fast-tracked fraudulent documents for a cut of the profits. At least 12 other families had been victimized, though none involved the perpetrator's own children. During the preliminary hearing, my parents maintained their innocence with stunning audacity. Dorothy wore pearls I'd given her for Mother's Day 5 years ago, a manipulation so blatant the prosecutor mentioned it in his notes. Frank sat rigid, his jaw clenched, refusing to look at me throughout the proceedings. Their new attorney, a public defender after Gary Hutchinson's arrest, tried to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her struggling parents. My clients maintained they believed they were protecting their daughter's interests, she argued. They feared she was being taken advantage of and sought to safeguard the family asset. Patricia's response was devastating. She presented security footage of Frank attempting to break into my house, recordings Megan had secretly made of them planning the fraud, and email chains between Dorothy and Linda Morrison discussing payment for special handling of documents. The judge's expression grew stonier with each piece of evidence. The forensic document examiner delivered the killing blow. "The signature on the quitclaim deed is indeed a forgery," Dr. Sarah Martinez testified. While skillfully executed, microscopic analysis reveals hesitation marks and pen pressure inconsistencies characteristic of traced signatures. Additionally, the ink chemistry doesn't match any pen Ms. Chen owns or has access to. My parents' reaction to mounting evidence was to double down on their victim narrative. Dorothy took the stand, tears streaming as she painted a picture of a daughter corrupted by success. "We gave her everything," she wailed. "Sacrificed our own dreams so she could go to college. And how does she repay us? By flaunting her wealth while we struggle to pay rent." The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. "Mrs. Chen, did you or did you not practice forging your daughter's signature?" Dorothy's tears dried instantly. I was trying to learn her handwriting to send thank you notes on her behalf, she lied smoothly. She's always too busy for family. And the $5,000 you paid Linda Morrison, the prosecutor pressed. That was a loan, Dorothy insisted. Linda's going through a tough time. Each lie dug their hole deeper. The security footage, the recordings, the digital evidence painted a clear picture of premeditated fraud that no amount of parental tears could wash away. Frank's testimony was even more damaging to their case. His anger overrode his attorney's coaching, and he revealed the depth of his resentment. She owes us, he snarled from the witness stand. We raised her, fed her, clothed her. That house should be ours by rights. Children are supposed to take care of their parents, not abandon them for some fancy neighborhood where she doesn't belong. The judge stopped him mid-rant. Mr. Chen, are you confessing to attempting to steal your daughter's property because you feel entitled to it? Frank's attorney frantically objected, but the damage was done. His own words had confirmed their guilt more effectively than any prosecution evidence. As the hearing concluded, the judge denied my parents' motion to maintain possession of the property pending trial. The evidence strongly suggests criminal fraud, he stated. The original owner, Ms. Alanna Chen, shall retain possession while this matter proceeds through appropriate channels. I'm also issuing a restraining order preventing the defendants from coming within 500 feet of the property or Ms. Chen. My parents exploded at the ruling. Dorothy had to be physically restrained by court officers as she lunged toward me, screaming about ungrateful children and family betrayal. Frank's threats were more specific, detailing how he'd make me regret humiliating them. The judge added criminal contempt charges to their growing list of legal troubles. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, tipped off by the unusual nature of the case. Miss Chen, how does it feel to have your own parents try to steal your home? One shouted. I pushed past them without comment, but Dorothy couldn't resist the cameras. Her impromptu press conference, where she accused me of elder abuse and manipulation, would later become evidence of defamation. That night, I sat in my legally secured home, my sister asleep in the guest room, and tried to process the devastation of the day. My parents, the people who'd given me life, had tried to destroy it out of pure spite. The restraining order was just paper, their hatred something no legal document could contain. Patricia called with one final update. Linda Morrison broke, she said. Full confession in exchange for a plea deal. She's providing evidence of at least 15 other property fraud cases your parents were planning to execute using the proceeds from selling your house. They had a whole operation planned. I hung up feeling numb. The house was safe for now. But the cost of victory was the complete destruction of my family. As I locked my doors and set my alarm that night, I wondered if my parents had any idea what they'd truly lost in their pursuit of what was never theirs to take. The morning Patricia called to say Linda Morrison wanted to meet, I was reviewing security footage from the previous night. My parents, restraining order notwithstanding, had driven past my house 6 times between midnight and dawn. They never stopped, just slowly cruised by, Frank's face visible in the passenger seat each time. The violation was clear, but proving malicious intent would be harder. Linda's lawyer reached out, Patricia explained over coffee in my kitchen. She wants to make a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Apparently, your parents' scheme was just the tip of a very large, very dirty iceberg. We met Linda at the federal building downtown, in a sterile conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and fear. She looked nothing like the confident woman who'd shared wine with my mother just weeks ago. Her hands shook as she pushed a box of documents across the table. Everything's in there, she whispered. Emails, texts, recordings I made for my own protection. I knew this day would come. The contents of that box would reshape the entire case. Linda had been meticulous, saving every communication with my parents dating back 8 months. The emails started innocuously enough, Dorothy complaining about ungrateful children and financial struggles. But by month 3, the tone had shifted dramatically. I need you to research quiet title actions, one email from Dorothy read. Frank found a lawyer who says there are ways to reclaim property from children who've forgotten their obligations to family. How fast can you process documents if we need to move quickly? Linda's response showed her initial reluctance. Dorothy, what you're suggesting sounds illegal. I can't risk my job or my pension. But my mother was persistent, her manipulation evident in subsequent messages. She played on Linda's gambling debts, her estranged relationship with her own children, her fears of ending up alone and broke. The financial records Patricia's team uncovered painted an even darker picture. My parents had opened multiple credit cards in my name over the years, maintaining minimum payments to keep them active. They'd been planning this theft since the day I graduated college, viewing my success as their retirement plan. Look at this, Patricia pointed to a spreadsheet on Frank's computer. He tracked your salary increases, estimated your savings, even calculated how much equity you'd have in a house based on different down payment scenarios. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They've been planning to steal from you for over 5 years. The security footage from my office break-in yielded more evidence. The hidden camera I'd installed captured not just the document theft, but conversations between Frank and Gary Hutchinson that revealed the broader conspiracy. After we get this house, we move on to the nephew in California, Gary had said while scanning my files. Same playbook. These entitled kids won't know what hit them. Megan's recordings were perhaps the most heartbreaking evidence. She'd started recording family dinners months ago, initially to protect herself from gaslighting. The casual cruelty in my parents' voices as they discussed my destruction was chilling. She thinks she's so special with her college degree and fancy job. Dorothy's voice crackled through Megan's phone speaker. Wait until she's homeless. She'll come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. And we'll be living in her nice house, teaching her about respect. Frank's contributions were equally venomous. I've already talked to a realtor. Once we get the house, we flip it fast. Take the profit and move to Arizona. Start fresh where nobody knows us. Alanna can explain to her fancy friends how she lost everything to her stupid parents. The forensic accountant Patricia hired discovered something that shocked even seasoned investigators. My parents had been running small-scale fraud schemes for years. Insurance claims for accidents that never happened. Workers' compensation fraud at Frank's various jobs. Even stealing from their own parents' estates when my grandparents passed. I'd been living with criminals my entire life without knowing it. Your success didn't create their criminality, Patricia assured me during one particularly difficult evening. It just focused it on you. They've always been this way. You were just too young and too trusting to see it. The handwriting expert, Dr. Martinez, provided additional analysis that strengthened our case. She'd examined not just the forged deed, but dozens of other documents my parents had created over the years. They're surprisingly skilled forgers, she testified in her deposition. This isn't their first attempt. I've found evidence of forged signatures on your college financial aid documents, apartment leases, even birthday cards where they signed your name to make it seem like you'd acknowledged gifts you never received. My employer, initially concerned about the drama affecting my work, became a powerful ally when they discovered my parents had been calling HR with false complaints. Keith, my boss, personally provided IT forensics support when we realized Dorothy had been trying to hack into my work email. She called pretending to be you, claiming you'd forgotten your password, he explained. When that didn't work, she tried to convince our receptionist that she needed access for a family emergency. The investigation expanded beyond my immediate situation when other victims began coming forward. Gary Hutchinson and Linda Morrison's partnership had defrauded at least 12 families, all following similar patterns. Adult children who'd achieved success suddenly found their property stolen by relatives who felt entitled to their achievements. My case was unique only in that I'd caught them relatively early. Uncle Bill provided crucial testimony about my parents' attempts to involve him in their scheme. They came to me with this whole sob story, he said during his deposition. Said Alanna had promised them the house, but was now reneging. Wanted me to co-sign loans against it. When I asked to see documentation, they got defensive. That's when I knew something was wrong. Even more damaging was the testimony of Carmen, Gary Hutchinson's former secretary. She brought boxes of files documenting years of fraudulent schemes. He kept trophies, she explained. Photos of houses he'd stolen, newspaper clippings about families destroyed by his actions. Your parents' file was marked easy marks with a note that said, "Greed makes them stupid." The digital forensics team found a treasure trove on Dorothy's laptop. She'd been part of online forums for parents wronged by successful children, where members shared tips on financial manipulation and legal loopholes. Her username, Proud Mama Deserves Better, had posted dozens of times about her ungrateful daughter and her plans to reclaim what's rightfully mine. One post, made the night before the forgery, was particularly damning. "Tomorrow we execute Operation Reality Check. My daughter will learn that success means nothing without family approval. By next week, I'll be sleeping in her master bedroom while she learns humility from a studio apartment." Justice is sweet, ladies. The forum responses were equally disturbing, with other parents sharing similar schemes and congratulating Dorothy on her courage to take what she deserved. The FBI later used these forums to identify and prosecute a nationwide ring of family fraud schemes. As evidence mounted, my parents' behavior became increasingly erratic. They violated the restraining order repeatedly, each incident captured on my security cameras. Frank was arrested trying to superglue my locks at 3 in the morning. Dorothy was caught spreading nails in my driveway, hoping to puncture my tires. Each arrest added to their legal troubles, but their rage seemed to override any sense of self-preservation. Their attorney finally withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences in legal strategy, which everyone understood meant my parents were impossible to defend. The public defender assigned to replace her looked exhausted after their first meeting. "They want to countersue you for emotional damages," she told Patricia wearily. "They're claiming you've destroyed their reputation and caused them severe distress by not accepting their love." The prosecution built an airtight case with our evidence. Forgery, fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, attempted grand larceny. The charges stacked up like a house of cards waiting to fall. The federal prosecutor, intrigued by the interstate nature of the broader fraud ring, took over the case, elevating it beyond simple family dispute to serious federal crimes. "Your parents are looking at significant prison time," Patricia informed me after a meeting with prosecutors. The federal charges alone carry up to 20 years. With the state charges added, they might never see freedom again. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a deep sadness for the waste of lives consumed by greed and resentment. The pretrial hearings revealed even more evidence as co-conspirators turned on each other. Linda Morrison provided bank records showing my parents had paid her not $5,000, but $15,000 over several months. Marcus Webb, the notary who'd falsely verified the forged documents, admitted to notarizing over 50 fraudulent deeds for Gary Hutchinson's operation. As the trial date approached, my life existed in a strange limbo. My house was legally secure, but I jumped at every unexpected sound. My career had survived the assault, but trust in family was shattered beyond repair. Megan and I grew closer, trauma bonding us in ways happy childhoods never could. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and utterly damning. My parents had documented their own crimes with the arrogance of people who never expected consequences. As I prepared to testify against them, I held on to one truth: they had chosen this path. Every forged signature, every lies told, every scheme plotted was a choice to prioritize greed over love. The evidence would convict them, but it would never explain the fundamental question that haunted me. How do parents look at their child's success and see only something to steal? The trial began on a humid Tuesday in September, the courthouse steps crowded with reporters drawn to the sensational nature of family betrayal. I arrived with Patricia and Megan, pushing through the chaos while avoiding eye contact with cameras. My parents had already given several jailhouse interviews, each painting them as victims of an ungrateful daughter's cruelty. Inside courtroom 4B, Judge Helen Roberts presided with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible human failing. The prosecution team, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Davidson, had warned me that trials involving family were particularly brutal. "Your parents' attorney will try to put your entire life on trial," he'd explained. "Stay calm, tell the truth, and let the evidence speak." Dorothy and Frank sat at the defense table looking oddly diminished. Months of legal battles had aged them, or perhaps I was finally seeing them without the filter of childhood loyalty. Dorothy wore the same black dress she'd worn to my college graduation, a manipulation so transparent it felt insulting. Frank stared straight ahead, his jaw working constantly as if chewing invisible grievances. The prosecution's opening statement laid out the case with clinical precision. Davidson walked the jury through the timeline, from the first forged signature to the attempted eviction, illustrating each step with evidence projected on courtroom screens. "This isn't a family dispute about hurt feelings," he stated. "This is calculated criminal fraud that destroyed multiple families and would have left Ms. Chin homeless if not for her vigilance." The defense attorney, Sandra Wilkins, took a different approach. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a tragedy of miscommunication. Dorothy and Frank Chin aren't criminals. They're heartbroken parents who believed they were protecting their daughter's interests. Yes, mistakes were made. But crimes? That's for you to decide after hearing the whole story." The first week of testimony established the technical aspects of the fraud. Document examiners explained forgery techniques. Financial analysts detailed the money trail. IT specialists showed digital evidence of planning and conspiracy. Each expert witness added another brick to the wall of guilt surrounding my parents, who sat increasingly rigid as their scheme unraveled publicly. When Gary Hutchinson took the stand as a prosecution witness, having made his own deal, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. He appeared in prison orange, his previous swagger replaced by desperate self-preservation. "Dorothy Chin approached me through a mutual acquaintance," he testified. "She said her daughter had stolen their retirement by buying a house instead of supporting them. She wanted justice, and she was willing to pay for it." His testimony revealed the mechanical cruelty of their plan. Meeting locations, payment schedules, forged techniques, all discussed like a business transaction. Frank Chin provided detailed intelligence about his daughter's routines. Dorothy handled the signatures. They were model clients, if you ignore the fact they were stealing from their own child. The cross-examination by my parents' attorney couldn't shake his testimony. If anything, her attempts to discredit him revealed more damaging details. "Isn't it true you've made deals to testify in 12 other cases?" she asked. 15, actually, Gary corrected. "Your clients weren't my only victims. Just the most eager." Linda Morrison's testimony was equally devastating. She appeared via video link, already serving time in minimum security. Her description of my mother's manipulation was chilling. "Dorothy played on every insecurity I had. She knew about my gambling problems, my debts, my loneliness. She made me feel like stealing from Alanna was somehow noble, like we were correcting an injustice." The emails between them, read aloud in court, showed the progression from friendship to conspiracy. Dorothy's messages grew increasingly focused on my financial success and her perceived deprivation. "My daughter drives a new car while I take the bus," one read. "She posts photos of restaurant meals while we eat ramen. The disrespect has to stop." When Megan took the stand, the family drama reached its emotional peak. My sister, wearing a simple blue dress and no makeup, looked younger than her 25 years. Her voice shook as she described life in our parents' home, the constant criticism, the manipulation disguised as love. "They talked about Alanna like she was an enemy," Megan testified. "Every success was a betrayal. When she got promoted, Mom said it was probably because she was sleeping with her boss. When she bought the house, Dad said she did it to humiliate them. They couldn't let her just be happy." The recordings Megan had made were played for the jury, my parents' voices filling the courtroom with their casual planning of my destruction. Dorothy's sharp intake of breath when she heard her own words was audible throughout the room. Frank actually stood up as if to leave before bailiffs reminded him of his circumstances. "Why did you make these recordings?" Davidson asked gently. Megan wiped tears before answering. Because they were turning me into them. I could feel myself starting to resent Alanna too, just from their constant poison. I needed proof that the thoughts in my head weren't originally mine. The defense's cross-examination of Megan was brutal. Wilkins tried to paint her as a manipulative younger daughter jealous of the attention I received. Isn't it true you're now living in your sister's house? Didn't you benefit from turning against your parents? Megan's response was powerful. I lost my parents because they chose crime over children. That's not a benefit. That's a tragedy. Character witnesses for both sides revealed the stark divide in family perception. My parents' neighbors described them as hostile and paranoid, always complaining about ungrateful relatives. My colleagues testified about my work ethic and integrity. Keith, my boss, detailed the harassment campaign that nearly cost me my job. When I finally took the stand, the weight of months of trauma pressed down like a physical force. Davidson led me through my story chronologically, from childhood memories of my parents' resentment towards successful relatives to the moment I discovered the forged deed. I kept my voice steady, focusing on facts rather than emotions. When did you first realize your parents were planning to steal from you? Davidson asked. I thought carefully before answering. Looking back, probably the day I told them about buying the house. The silence on the phone wasn't surprise. It was calculation. They were already planning. The cross-examination was exactly as brutal as warned. Wilkins attacked my character, my choices, my success. Isn't it true you flaunted your wealth in front of parents who struggled financially? I met her gaze steadily. I shared my joy about achieving a lifelong dream. If that's flaunting, then I'm guilty of being happy about my hard work paying off. She tried another angle. You never offered to help your parents financially? I had been prepared for this. I offered repeatedly to help them budget, to connect them with financial advisors, to assist with job searches. They wanted cash, not solutions. They wanted dependence, not independence. The most difficult moment came when Wilkins showed photos of family gatherings, trying to establish a pattern of me excluding my parents. Each image told a different story than she intended. There I was at Christmas, gifts in hand while my parents scowled. At Thanksgiving, serving food while Dorothy criticized my cooking. Every happy family photo revealed the tension I'd normalized for too long. Dorothy's testimony was a masterclass in manipulation. She cried on cue, painted herself as a devoted mother betrayed by an ungrateful child. We gave her everything, she sobbed. Private tutoring, college support, love, and guidance. And how does she repay us? By abandoning us the moment she finds success. Davidson's cross-examination methodically destroyed her narrative. Mrs. Chin, did you or did you not practice forging your daughter's signature hundreds of times? Dorothy's tears dried instantly. I was learning calligraphy, she lied. As a hobby. The signature practice sheets, entered into evidence, showed only my name repeated obsessively, no other calligraphy attempts. And the $5,000 you paid Linda Morrison? Davidson pressed. A loan between friends, Dorothy insisted. The bank records showing for services rendered in the memo line suggested otherwise. Each lie was immediately contradicted by evidence, but Dorothy seemed incapable of admitting truth even when caught. Frank's testimony was worse. His anger overrode any coaching, revealing the depth of his resentment. Children owe their parents, he declared from the stand. We made sacrifices, worked jobs we hated, lived in poverty while she went to college. That house should be ours by right. She stole our retirement by keeping it for herself. Judge Roberts intervened. Mr. Chin, are you saying you're entitled to your adult daughter's property because you fulfilled basic parental obligations? Frank's response sealed his fate. She wouldn't exist without us. Everything she has is because we made her. So yes, we're entitled to whatever we want from her. The jury's faces showed their disgust. Several parents on the jury looked particularly appalled, understanding that Frank had just confessed to viewing children as investments rather than individuals. His attorney tried damage control, but Frank's genuine beliefs had been exposed. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. Davidson reminded the jury that this wasn't about family disagreements, but criminal conspiracy. Dorothy and Frank didn't just betray their daughter's trust. They committed multiple felonies with planning and malice. They documented their own crimes because they believed parental status put them above the law. Wilkins made one last attempt to humanize my parents, talking about generational differences and cultural expectations. But she couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence or their own testimonies revealing criminal intent. Her plea for leniency rang hollow after weeks of proven lies and manipulation. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. As the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Dorothy collapsed in theatrical sobs while Frank sat stone-faced. 27 guilty verdicts between them, covering everything from fraud to conspiracy to identity theft. The federal charges alone guaranteed significant prison time. As court officers prepared to lead them away, my mother turned to me one last time. "I hope you're happy," she hissed. "You've destroyed your family." I found my voice for the first time in the courtroom. "No, Mom. You destroyed our family the day you decided your greed mattered more than your daughter's dreams." The sentencing would come later, but the verdict was clear. My parents had chosen crime over family, greed over love, entitlement over pride in their daughter's success. They would have years in prison to contemplate those choices. As I left the courthouse, Megan's hand in mine, I felt no victory, only relief that the nightmare was finally ending. 6 months after the verdict, I stood in my backyard planting rose bushes where my mother once told me nothing beautiful could grow. The morning sun warmed my face as I worked the soil, each plant representing a step toward reclaiming not just my house, but my life. The restraining orders were permanent now, the security cameras merely precautionary, and slowly, very slowly, peace was replacing paranoia. The sentencing had been swift and severe. Dorothy received 12 years federal time plus 5 years state, sentences to run concurrently. Frank got 15 years federal, 7 years state, his longer sentence reflecting additional charges for attempting to intimidate witnesses. They'd been transferred to separate facilities after Dorothy attacked Frank in the holding cell, blaming him for their capture. Their marriage, built on shared resentment, couldn't survive shared consequences. Megan had transformed in ways that amazed me. Free from our parents' toxic influence, she'd enrolled in nursing school, moved into her own apartment after 6 months with me, and started therapy to process a lifetime of manipulation. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me I don't deserve success," she told me during one of our weekly dinners. Then I remember that voice was never mine. It was theirs, and they're gone. Our relationship had evolved from sisters by birth to friends by choice. We established boundaries our parents never allowed, respected each other's independence while maintaining closeness. Tuesday dinners at my house became sacred time, cooking together in the kitchen where Dorothy once demanded to review my mortgage papers. The extended family had fractured and reformed in unexpected ways. Grandmother Rose, despite her age, became our fiercest defender. She'd indeed rewritten her will, establishing education trusts for Megan and me while explicitly disinheriting Dorothy. "I failed as a mother somewhere," she told me during one visit. "I don't know how Dorothy became so twisted, but I won't let her poison another generation." Uncle Bill stepped into a paternal role neither of us expected. He helped Megan with tuition, advised me on home repairs, and never once suggested we should forgive our parents. "Some bridges need to stay burned," he said when distant relatives pushed for reconciliation. "Your safety matters more than their comfort." The house itself had transformed from a symbol of achievement to a fortress and finally to simply home. I'd redecorated extensively, partly for fresh starts and partly to erase memories of my parents' intrusion. The office where they'd stolen documents became a library. The front door they'd scratched trying to break in was replaced with a beautiful oak entrance that welcomed rather than defended. My career had not only survived but thrived. Keith promoted me to director of marketing, noting that anyone who could handle a criminal conspiracy while maintaining work excellence deserved recognition. The company implemented new security measures after learning about my parents' harassment attempts, protecting all employees from similar situations. I started a blog about financial abuse within families, sharing my story anonymously at first, then openly as shame transformed into advocacy. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of messages from adult children dealing with similar parental entitlement, elderly parents robbed by adult children, siblings destroying each other over inheritance. Financial abuse within families was epidemic, hidden by shame and misplaced loyalty. The blog evolved into a nonprofit organization, Family Financial Justice. We provided resources for victims, connected them with legal aid, and most importantly, validated their experiences. The gaslighting my parents had attempted was standard practice in family financial abuse. Victims needed to hear that protecting themselves wasn't selfish, that blood relation didn't grant theft rights. Speaking engagements followed, sharing my story with financial planners, estate attorneys, and family counselors. Each presentation hurt less, scar tissue forming over wounds. The question I received most often was whether I'd forgiven my parents. The answer remained complicated. Forgiveness, I learned, didn't require reconciliation. I'd forgiven them for my own peace, releasing the anger that poisoned my days. But forgetting was impossible and reconnection would be dangerous. They'd shown me who they were, and I believed them. Love could coexist with permanent distance. A year after the trial, I received a letter from Dorothy through her attorney. Prison letterhead made my hands shake, but I read it with Megan present for support. The letter was exactly what I'd expected. No accountability, no genuine remorse, only complaints about prison conditions and demands that I drop charges I couldn't drop even if I wanted to. She still doesn't get it, Megan observed, reading over my shoulder. She thinks this is something you did to her, not consequences for what she did to you. We burned the letter in my fire pit that evening, watching toxic words transform into harmless ash. Frank never wrote. Sources told me he'd found religion in prison, leading Bible studies and counseling other inmates. I hoped it was genuine transformation rather than another manipulation, but I'd never risk finding out. Some people earned permanent exile from your life, and parents who tried to steal your home qualified. The financial recovery took time. Legal fees had drained my savings, though the eventual restitution judgments would help eventually. My parents were ordered to pay back everything they'd stolen plus damages, though collecting from imprisoned felons would take years. I rebuilt slowly, the security of homeownership intact even if the bank account suffered. Dating presented unique challenges. How do you explain on a third date that your parents were in federal prison for trying to steal your house? I learned to be upfront about it, using reactions as character tests. The right person would understand that family complexity didn't define individual worth. After several false starts, I met David at a Financial Peace University class, both of us there for different, but equally valid reasons. David's family embraced me with the warmth mine never showed. His parents celebrated my achievements without resentment. His siblings included me without calculation. Experiencing healthy family dynamics felt foreign at first, waiting for the criticism that never came, the manipulation that wasn't planned. 2 years after the trial, I hosted Thanksgiving in my home. The dining room filled with chosen family. Megan and her girlfriend Sarah, Uncle Bill and his family, Grandmother Rose despite her walker, Keith and his wife, Patricia who'd become a friend beyond legal representation, David and his parents. The table groaned under dishes everyone contributed, abundance without strings attached. As I stood to carve the turkey, emotion overwhelmed me. This house my parents tried to steal had become headquarters for the family I'd built. Every person present had chosen to be there, connected by love rather than obligation. Dorothy and Frank had given me life, but tried to destroy it. These people had helped me rebuild it stronger. Before we eat, I said, raising my glass, I want to thank everyone for being here. For showing me that family isn't just DNA. It's showing up, supporting dreams, celebrating success without resentment. You've all taught me that love multiplies rather than divides. This house stands because you stood with me. Grandmother Rose wiped tears. Uncle Bill cleared his throat roughly. Megan squeezed my hand under the table. David kissed my temple softly. This was family. Not perfect, not without complexity, but real and present and supportive. The empty chairs where my parents might have sat held no ghosts. They'd made their choices, prioritizing greed over gratitude, entitlement over encouragement. Prison was their present, bitterness their future. But here in this house they'd tried to steal, surrounded by people who loved without conditions, I'd found something they'd never understand. True wealth had nothing to do with property and everything to do with people who celebrated your success rather than trying to steal it. As pie was served and laughter filled rooms that had known such darkness, I realized the greatest revenge against my parents' betrayal was simply this: being happy. Building the life they'd tried to destroy. Succeeding not despite them, but because their absence allowed growth they would have poisoned. The house was mine, legally and emotionally. But more importantly, so was my life. Every choice, every success, every moment of joy belonged to me without apology or explanation. My parents had taught me valuable lessons through their negativity: who not to become, what not to accept, how not to love. Outside, the rose bushes bloomed despite Dorothy's prediction. Inside, chosen family proved that blood might make you related, but loyalty made you family. And in my heart, finally, there was peace. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of accepting that some people choose to be villains in your story, and the best response is to write them out of subsequent chapters. My parents went crazy when I bought a house for myself. They forged papers to take it for their own greed. But in trying to steal my home, they'd given me something invaluable. The knowledge that I could survive betrayal, rebuild after destruction, and create a life so beautiful that their bitterness couldn't touch it. The house stood strong. So did I. And that was the only revenge that mattered. As our evening wound down and guests prepared to leave, each carrying leftover dishes I'd insisted they take, Megan pulled me aside. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for showing me that we didn't have to become them." We hugged in my kitchen, two survivors who'd chosen healing over hatred. When everyone had gone and David helped me clean up, I stood in my living room absorbing the echoes of laughter and love. This house had witnessed attempted theft, family destruction, and legal battles. But tonight, it had witnessed something more powerful: the triumph of chosen family over blood betrayal, of love over greed, of building something beautiful from the ashes of what others tried to burn. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Saw the blog post about hosting holidays after family trauma. Beautiful work. Your parents gave you pain, but you've transformed it into purpose. That's the best revenge of all." She was right. Every person I helped through family financial justice, every story shared that made someone feel less alone, every resource provided to protect another victim was proof that my parents' cruelty had failed its ultimate goal. They'd wanted to break me. Instead, they'd revealed exactly how unbreakable I was. As I locked my door that night, secure in my home and my life, I thought about the title question one last time. My parents went crazy when I bought a house for myself. They forged papers to take it for their greed, their resentment, their twisted sense of entitlement. But in the end, all they'd taken was their own freedom, their own family, their own futures. The house remained mine. More importantly, so did my story. And I was writing it beautifully, one peaceful day at a time. Do you have family members who resent your success? Have you ever faced betrayal from those who should support you most? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember that protecting yourself from toxic family isn't selfish, it's necessary. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over family trauma. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in dealing with difficult relatives. Thank you for joining me on this journey of survival and healing, and remember, the best response to those who try to tear you down is to build yourself up even stronger.